We all love hearing stories about women who are making great impact and taking bold steps. And our guest today is no exception. From going through different career choices to leading and co-founding multiple startups, one of which is helping shape the way we look at entrepreneurship today, I believe you're going to be very inspired by Sophie's story and her journey. So hi, listeners, I'm Griselda Togobo, and this is a leadership podcast where I interview female leaders and they share practical and simple strategies to help you win in the world of work. So Sophie is a co-founder and CEO of The Garden, a seed-stage venture-backed startup, building a community for the curious, and I love that. The community brings together people who love to learn for the simple joy of learning. Prior to that, Sophie founded and led Multiverse, a UK and US startup business that is building an outstanding alternative to university through apprenticeships, something, again, I'll love to talk about today, Sophie. In addition to that, Sophie is an active angel investor and mentor and champion of the UK tech community. Sophie, welcome. You are one busy lady.
Thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to be able to talk to you.
Yes. So most people read bios and see women like yourself and just wonder, wow, where did it all start? So can you just share a bit about where it all started?
Sure. Well, it hasn't been a straight line journey. I think people assume you wake up, at the age of 16 and you set up a lemonade stand outside your house and suddenly you're an entrepreneur and that's what you're going to be for the rest of your life. And I don't think that's actually true. I've said this to many times before, that I think some people discover entrepreneurship early, particularly if they've got family members who are entrepreneurs or have their own small businesses, and that's kind of in their DNA, in their blood from seeing it growing up. And other people become entrepreneurs later in their life. And I was definitely in the second category. So growing up, my parents were doctors. In fact, my whole family are in the medical world, whether sort of nurses or physios. Nobody had run their own business. And so it was not something I was exposed to at all. And then I ended up going to university. And at that time, there wasn't a huge amount of careers advice.
Yes.
When people left university, they went into accounting and law and consulting and finance. That was the standard route, or they went into the charity sector or into the sort of into the civil service. And so there wasn't really a path for me into anything like entrepreneurship. And so I did several different jobs through my 20s. I dabbled in a few different things, not really finding exactly what I was working on. But when you look back, you see these threads where you've picked up specific skills and experiences that then lead you to the point where you start a company. And for me, the point where I decided I wanted to start my own company was I was working for a US tech company called hired.com, which was a tech recruitment platform for tech talent. So you could go on there and find a job, or companies could go and find candidates. And I was launching the UK business for them and growing that team. And it was a bit like running your own company within a bigger company. So it's a risk-free version of being an entrepreneur. And it was a very entrepreneurial business. And that gave me that taste of, oh, I like this. I want to do something myself. And then that's when you and I met and co-founded Multiverse.
Wow. So you just caught the entrepreneurship bug from having that experience. So I'm so glad you went through your journey that way, because I am one of the people who saw entrepreneurship being modeled and I went into it, even though I never actually wanted to be one, but fell into it as a matter of course. And then later on finding out that, oh my God, you have to learn so much. There's so much you have to learn. And you don't get taught that in school, do you? It doesn't matter how many degrees you have. When you're an entrepreneur, you're learning every single day on the job. So I just wanted to focus a bit more on your career path in your 20s and drifting and dabbling and that being okay. Because I think sometimes people feel that you need to have everything figured out in your 20s, certainly in your 30s. We women have this pressure about things you should have achieved in your 20s and 30s and whatnot. What do you have to say to that?
Yeah, I definitely didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. I'm still not 100% sure. I think we're always figuring out what's the next thing we want to do, right?
Yes.
But my first job actually after university was as a conference producer, which was an amazing experience. I worked for a small company that did conferences in the finance sector and in the defense sector. My first conference was called Defense Logistics. And so I was speaking to defense and procurement organizations all around the world and learning about what they did. And I actually really loved it because it was very entrepreneurial. So you were thrown in as a 22-year-old or something, given a conference as your project, and told to go speak to people about what the problems they needed solving, who should be the speakers for the conference, how are you going to market the conference, how are you going to get delegates to turn up to the conference, how are you going to work with a sales team and a marketing team and an events team. And I really, really loved it. But all my friends were in these sort of more standard milk round style industries. They'd all gone into graduate schemes. I was in this job. I just had a job. And even though I love this job, my kind of ego got the better of me. Looking back now, I know that's the case. I sort of thought, maybe I should be doing what they're doing. And so I ended up, while I was doing this job, applying for the milk round of graduate schemes, and ended up getting a job in banking, investment banking, in fact. And this was in 2007. So about 6 weeks after I started in banking, the markets crashed. And I experienced what was definitely for me, the low light of my career, which was a very, very tough 16 months in banking. I started in Goldman. It was a very difficult environment to be in, I think, for everyone. People were getting laid off in rounds of redundancies. And it created this very intense and pressured environment. And I didn't really know what I was getting into. I didn't know anyone who'd worked in banking. I assumed that I would get trained to do the job, and actually it was a very different experience, and it really destroyed my confidence. I felt I wasn't good enough. I felt that I wasn't probably, I guess, financy enough to do it, and I ended up leaving after 16 months. I quit, which was an incredibly difficult decision, because at that moment in my life, I thought that leaving was the worst decision I could possibly make, that I somehow had failed by leaving. And it took me a long time to make that decision, lots of tears and a fear, basically, that people would kill for that job, that it was such a prestigious opportunity and I was throwing it away. And that really affected my confidence, and it took a long time to kind of rebuild that. So it's an interesting, when you reflect back on it, that actually that quote unquote failure allowed me the opportunity to go on and experience other things, open the door for me in different ways. But I definitely didn't know what I wanted to do. I definitely didn't know what I wanted to be. And I think that experience was kind of indicative of that. I took what I thought I should be doing rather than what I wanted to do or what I felt I was good at.
Yeah, so you got sucked into the whole societal expectation and the whole peer pressure. But even that is okay, because when you look back, as you've said, every decision leads you right to where you are now. And even though in that moment it might be so painful, later on it's almost like a gift. I also left Deloitte and Touche. Again, another employer that most people would say, oh my God, why are you leaving that job? But it just didn't feel right for me. And I wanted a balance. I just had my first child, and I really wanted that flexibility and control that I didn't feel I was going to get from that employer. And I just didn't feel I'll reach my full potential. So very similar to you, I made that leap. But you've also talked about confidence, something I've also experienced, losing confidence at different stages of your life. So how did you build yourself back up again to then be able to take a massive leap and start your own business, albeit with a partner?
So after I left banking, I ended up going to work for an executive search firm, and I was surrounded by amazing people. It wasn't something I planned to do. I didn't think, oh, I want to go and be a headhunter. Like a lot of people who end up going into recruitment, kind of fell into it. Somebody said, why don't you apply for this job? I went to apply for it, didn't really know what it was about, but met these amazing people. And what's interesting about executive search is it's normally something people do as a second career. So they've done something and then they've built some skills, they know what good looks like, and they go and become a headhunter, an executive search consultant. And I was one of the juniors in the team working with these incredible senior people who were leading these searches, and got to learn a lot about how do you make decisions about talent, how do you build leadership teams, how do you think about board compositions, how are CEOs and boards thinking about hiring, and how to create good recruitment processes. Again, incredible skills once you become an entrepreneur yourself, because you're hiring teams, setting people and selling. And but what that experience actually gave me, apart from those skills, was confidence, because it was a team of wonderful, kind, thoughtful, nurturing people who saw something in me and wanted to build me up again. And the more they sort of supported me and encouraged me, the more I blossomed. And I think the lesson that I've taken away from that is the importance of the people that you work with. In everything. So, when people say, should I take this job or this job? And I say, you should choose based on the people, because if you find people you can learn from, people who will mentor you, people who believe in you, people who grow you and give you opportunities, it doesn't matter what the company is or what the role is, you're going to grow. And I think that's really important early in your career.
Oh, that's such brilliant advice, Sophie. Because I think I read an analogy online about a plant. When a plant begins to die, it's not because of the plant, it's because the soil or there's toxicity in the environment, or you're not watering it enough or giving it enough love. And if you move the plant to the right environment, immediately it blossoms and it fruits, and that's exactly what you're saying. Sometimes we focus so much on the brand of the companies, on the money we're going to earn, on that extra holiday you get, but then ultimately you don't grow, you just feel stuck after a while. So thank you so much for sharing that. I know I love the fact that I went to university. My mom did not go to uni. I had the opportunity to go to university, so it's something I really advocate for. But I also know that there are different routes now to success. It's not just the university path. And you obviously are also a strong advocate for apprenticeships. Can you just share your thinking about that and why you're encouraging people to take that path?
Yeah, I think when you and I started what at the time was called WhiteHat, now Multiverse, the belief was that whilst university is an incredible opportunity and it is a great route for many people, I had a great time at university. I learned, a lot. I found it very enriching because I like that kind of study. It doesn't work for everyone. And there are some very ambitious, very bright, very, engaged people who love learning, who love growing, for whom going to university is not the right route. And what we wanted to create with Multiverse was a prestigious path that was an alternative to university. So an outstanding alternative to university, not a second choice, not something for other people's children, as it were, but something that could stand up to the world's best university, the Ivy League universities, the Oxbridges of the world, where you'd say, if I have these two offers, it's a true choice, and it's based on how I like to learn, how I want to live my life, what's important to me. We also felt that for many people, university was becoming a barrier to their accessing opportunity. So, the cost of university has gone up, and for many people, the return on investment isn't high enough. It doesn't necessarily give them the skills they need to get a job. It doesn't necessarily open the doors to the best careers. And so by creating apprenticeships where people could start their career with the world's best companies, whether that's Google or Sky or it's maybe a small accountancy firm that's going to grow and develop you, we could give people access to the best jobs. They wouldn't take on university debt. They get paid, and they get trained and skilled. And on top of that, we knew that if we wanted to create this outstanding alternative to university, we needed to create that community, that network, that social experience, which is one of the things that many people take away from their university experience, those professional connections that last you through your life. And so with Multiverse, that's what we created: incredible training, jobs at the world's best companies, and this community of apprentices that are very proud to walk this alternative path. And the proof is in the pudding. You know, the company has grown. The number of people taking apprenticeships, both in the UK and US, is growing year on year, you know, into the tens of thousands now. And I think we're really starting to change the narrative around what the options are for young people as they leave school. It shouldn't just be university or bust. It needs to be tailored to the individual.
Fantastic. So tell me about your experience building this company with a partner. It can't be the easiest thing to do, but at the same time, I can see the benefits of being on this journey with someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. I think anyone who's built a company on their own would say that it's very lonely, and having a co-founder allows you to have somebody who can be a thought partner, who can be somebody that, you know, on your bad days you can go to for, you know, a hug, who you can be there for on the bad days, where you can discuss the difficult decisions that you need to make at various points along the journey. One of my friends, so when I was deciding whether or not to, you know, start another company, and was thinking, do I do it on my own, or do I, you know, find a co-founder? And my co-founder Simon for the Garden is wonderful and very different to me, and I can tell you a bit more about that. But when I was thinking about it, I spoke to one of my friends, and he said, I would never start a company without a co-founder, just because it is you know, being a founder of a company is, as you know, is incredibly hard work. And you want those complementary skill sets, and also having that person that you can lean on. So I think in many ways it's, you know, people describe it as a bit like a marriage. You know, you have your ups and downs. It's all about communication. It's all about having alignment around values. And sometimes marriages do like blossom, and sometimes they go through tricky patches. But I think it's all about honesty and communication to make them work.
So you seem to have a knack for recognizing when to move on, because you've said a lot of goodbyes, and it's quite a difficult decision to make. It's time to close this chapter. It's time to start a new chapter. All the people you leave behind, all the new people you have to find. When do you know it's time to move on, and what led you to that decision with Multiverse?
So I think people have, you know, so I think everyone has strong intuition. It's just whether you listen to that intuition. And I've been feeling for a while that we were getting to the point with Multiverse where my role was going to become either smaller or kind of move more into special projects. We needed to have kind of much more clarity in the team. That Ewan's the CEO, and we were hiring this senior leadership team, and it made sense for those people to report to Ewan. And so I was thinking about, like, how does my role evolve? And what I didn't really probably want to do was move into more like an internal kind of operations role. That's not my personality. I like to lead at the front. I like to set strategy, make decisions. And so for me, it felt like the right moment where the business was doing incredibly well. We'd hired a fantastic team. I think almost all of who are still there at sort of the leadership level. Ewan was in a great place to continue, and I stayed on the board for another year, sort of to manage, you know, to help with that transition. And I wanted to go off and build another startup and get back to the early stages of building a company. I think it's when a company gets to a certain size and scale, that, you know, it's still very exciting, but there are challenges, different kinds of challenges associated with that. And, you know, make fast decisions, you can test, you can iterate, you build something from nothing. And that is something I wanted to do again. So you're right, it's very hard, and it was a very difficult decision. But I think it's all about how you leave and why you leave, and communicating that clearly, that it's not about the fact that you don't believe in the company or the vision.
Yes.
I absolutely do. But that it's the right decision for you, and it's the right decision for the company, and you do it so that the company continues to do well and people continue to do well. And my old team know that I'm always there if they want to chat, and many of them do reach out all the time to have a conversation. So, you know, maintaining those relationships is key.
Oh my God, I think the relationships are everything. And It's a skill in learning how to say goodbye and doing it with empathy and compassion as well. But I'm going to ask you a really difficult question now, because I've interviewed another female leader who started a business with her partner, a husband, and she defaulted to him being CEO. And in her case, she said, well, I just felt like he had more to offer. I just felt like he could do a better job of it. And I did not see myself as a leader. So I'm just wondering whether there was anything like that going on, or was it really just genuinely down to natural strengths and preferences? Is there something that we women tend to fall into?
So Ewan had the original idea for WhiteHat, now Multiverse, and had started an idea before I joined him. So I joined him a few months after he started it. So he was already the CEO for the business. And I actually think with Ewan and I, we had a lot of similar skill sets, probably not complementary enough in some way.
Right.
And I think when you're early in a business, that's wonderful, because it's basically sort of, you're not just doubling yourself, you're like tripling yourself. You can step in and out, you can, you think in a similar way. It's wonderful. And then as the business scales, you need more of that complementarity so that you can fill all those leadership roles, and you can, you're not stepping on each other's toes. So that's why with the Garden, my co-founder and I have quite complementary skill sets. Simon is a CTO. He leads on the product and engineering side. I lead as the CEO on, our programming, the vision, actually look after finance and all that kind of fun stuff. So we are able to sort of divide and conquer a bit more in that regard. I've never been a shrinking violet about sort of wanting to be the leader. I mean, one of the reasons for wanting to start the Garden was to be able to step up into the CEO role of my own business. So it definitely wasn't a default decision. But it was the right decision for Multiverse, for Ewan to be the CEO. And it's the right decision for the Garden for me to be the CEO.
Fabulous. And so you've done this twice. What have you learned on this journey?
I wouldn't say I've done it twice. I started a second time. Startups are hard, really, really hard, but really fun. And on the days when it's really, really hard, because there are, as many good days as bad days, right? It's whether you go through a roller coaster of emotions in a single day. I sometimes say to myself, why are you doing this again? Why put yourself through this? I've got 2 small children. I've got other things that I could be doing. Why am I doing it again? And I think it comes down to, why wouldn't I do it again? It's such a privilege to be able to create something that you want to see in the world. I'm not sure I'm employable anymore. I definitely couldn't work for somebody else. Now, too used to calling the shots on certain things. And I'm not sure there's anything else I'd want to do. So it's both really hard and really amazing.
Yes.
And those two things come hand in hand. The other thing is, it's not necessarily any easier second time around. So there are definitely things that you learn along the journey. So there are mistakes that I haven't made this time that I made the first time. But every business is different, and so you make new mistakes and you learn new things. And it's, unless you're creating a carbon copy of your old business, it's very hard to just transplant all the learnings into the new business, because people are different, setup is different, environment is different. We founded Multiverse in a bull market, and the Garden is now, we started it last year, but we're now going into a world where we've got high inflation and interest rates changing, the funding market is changing. And so, there are all these things that are different. And the one thing that and everyone who works in companies know, is the only thing that doesn't change is change itself. Like, it's constantly changing, constantly learning. But that's part of the fun and the joy of it.
Yeah. One of the things I found the hardest is learning to lead people. Just being able to step up into that leadership role. And I know for women, there are still not enough female leaders out there. What have you learned, and how have you evolved in your leadership?
So I've never been scared to step into a leadership role. As my mum would say, when I was little, I was definitely sort of in charge of the troops of children when, primary school and nursery school and this kind of thing. So I know for some people it's tough to step up. I'll be honest, it's not something that I've ever thought about. Like if I have an idea about how I want to do something or something I want to create, I can be very focused about sort of trying to get it done. I think what I have learned over the years is about how you bring people along with you, and about the fact that you don't have to lead through brute force. So, you don't have to make all the decisions. You need to listen more. You want to hire people who have skills that you don't have, and then give them the space in order to be able to lead. And actually learning how to develop and grow other people to become leaders is both a wonderfully empowering experience, but also it gives you so much pleasure and joy when you see people sort of stepping up into their power, into their potential. So that has changed. I think the other thing that's changed for me is I always felt I needed to be kind of perfect, not make mistakes earlier on in my career. And I've learned to be more honest about not just my mistakes, but sort of let people in a bit more. I'm very comfortable now saying, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I have no idea. Or, oops, I made a mistake. Because I think modeling that for the team is really important. If I don't know, it's okay for other people to not know. But just because we don't know doesn't mean we're not going to figure it out. So I think that's really important. And then also, you talked about compassion and empathy. I think becoming a parent really changed me in terms of my ability to empathize with parents, particularly. I think, when you're a young woman, maybe you sometimes feel resentful of the fact that your colleagues who have family leave to go to do school pickup and stuff, and you feel like you're taking on more. And actually, that's not necessarily the case. Like what I've learned is that parents are more efficient. They will focus their time and energy on what needs to get done. They are very aware of, the trade-offs that they make in their life. And now I hire a lot of parents because I think that they are just as ambitious, just as driven, better at kind of juggling their workload, and very committed. And I think that's a shift in me from my own life experience.
Yeah. I think sometimes when you look around you initially you think, oh my God, I'm so good at what I'm doing, and I want it to be so perfect, and I just want people around me who are perfect and can get it done exactly the way I've seen it in my mind. But as you evolve, as you become more mature, you realize that one, you're not perfect, so everybody else is not perfect, and the only constant that things will go wrong. It's how you bounce back from the down days and from the challenges and all the things that life just keeps throwing at you as well. So as a mom, as a CEO of a startup, and this today, as we're recording this, is Mental Health Week. And it's a topical issue now. There's so many challenges in that. I know for myself, I've been on a journey trying to really just take care of my brain and myself and my well-being. What practices do you do, if any at all, that help you maintain, a fantastic well-being, and for you to show up the way you just showed up today?
I genuinely believe that sleep is the most important thing. As anyone with small children knows, that it's the lack of sleep that destroys you. So I do actually try and prioritize getting a decent amount of sleep. Now, obviously, we've all worked with after a poor night's sleep, and it's never, from my point of view, an excuse. I'll try and push through, but I then try and make sure that I get a good night's sleep the next night and focus on that. The second thing is I do meditate, not super regularly, but I did do a course a couple of years ago with the London Meditation Centre, where I learned some of the practices and techniques of meditation. And I was pretty consistent about doing it at least once a day for about a year. Now I wouldn't say every day. I know that when I do it, I feel calmer. I feel I have more energy. I feel I have more focus. It's a kind of tool in my toolbox that I can pull out regularly in order to be able to kind of refill my pot. But there are other tools that I use in order to focus on kind of my mental health. Actually, I wouldn't even call it mental health. I think of it as more like energy buckets, you know, my physical,
Yes.
mental, my emotional, my creative energy, and just use these different tools, whatever those are. And they're always going to be personal to you in order to refill those energy buckets. So if I'm feeling, you know, emotionally drained, what do I need to do? Whether that's listen to music, go for a walk, speak to a friend, in order to refill my energy levels on the emotional side. And these are all different things. You know, it's worth everyone's knowing what those tools are that they can pull out of the bag when they're having a low day.
Yeah, I think it's really spot on what you say about energy, because the days when you feel you're winning and you're on top of the world are the days where you woke up having had a great night's sleep and you just have bucket loads of energy and everything just feels everything feels possible. And the days where you have no energy at all are the days where, you know, it's a bit dark and depressing and a bit heavy going. So thank you so much for sharing that. And one of the ladies on my team, Kath, really wanted me to ask a question about Gen Zs and overlooked 50s. So you made a comment somewhere online, I think, about the overfocus on Gen Z. What do you think we should be doing differently? How can we tap into the over 50s more in the workplace?
I'm not sure which comment I made, but I'm definitely a big advocate for having diverse teams of all types. And I think one of the most overlooked types of diversity people don't talk about as much is age diversity. I think there's often there is an overemphasis on youth without considering experience. And actually, I think you need to have both. You know, there's no point in just hiring people who've never done something before and reinventing the wheel on every single situation. Sometimes that can be very valuable, but often experience can be also valuable. So it's about mixing those two some mindsets up and recognizing that you can have a beginner's mindset as an older person, and you can have a lot of experience and youth wisdom as a younger person, and so it's that kind of blended approach. I mean, I've had members of teams who are in their sort of 50s, even sort of 60s, who are fantastic additions to the team. They can be culture carriers, they may be a bit calmer, but they're just as effective, in fact probably more effective in certain ways. So I think there's an over focus on just, you know, youth and and this kind of like first principles mindset, but you have to balance it out. There's no point in reinventing the wheel on every situation.
Fabulous. And globally, I think there are only 2% of VC funds invested in women, and there are very few angel investors who are women as well. And I know that that is an area that you're quite active in. Can you just share how, you know, what's been your experience in that sector and what you look out for in a great investment?
So I feel like I've been very lucky to have people around me as angel investors and mentors and advisors who've supported me, not just in terms of money and investment, but also in terms of advice and sort of emotional support. I think actually that's one of the biggest things that you can give to other founders. So when I stepped back from Multiverse, I decided I wanted to do a bit of angel investing to support other founders. My main motivation is not to make money from doing it. You have to write off angel investments when you make them, because you think to yourself, okay, if this returns, wonderful, but if it doesn't, that's kind of my expectation. But it's such a privilege to go on the journey with founders and see their experiences, and I learn a lot from what they do. I invested in companies completely outside sectors that I've got any experience in. I've got some investments in sectors that I can add specific value in, but mostly it's about being able to support these founders. There's a company that I'm an investor in It's called Ruka, and the founders are amazing. And they call me their hype girl, because we have a WhatsApp group, and every time they have a wonderful piece of news, they send it around, and I just so excited for them, and I want to share it with everyone. And founders need that, because they don't get a lot of sort of feedback from other people saying you're doing a good job, and having other founders going, you're doing great, like, don't worry, this is really difficult, what you're doing is amazing, keep going. It's great to be able to provide that, pay it forward.
Yeah, it's amazing. Just the right word in the right moments, can just be exactly what they need as well. We love to read in our community. And so before I go to the book recommendation, I'll give you a minute to think about that. I know you're a big community builder, with what you're doing now. What have you learned in that process? What is it taking? What are you needing to do to build an effective, cohesive, engaged community?
I think one of the things that I'm discovering is communities obviously need to give value to their members. Like, you've got to have a reason for participating in it. What does it bring to me? What do I get from being part of the community? I also think it needs to resonate with a part of your identity that you weren't feeling was being recognized or fulfilled. Yes. I think a community is a lot about identity. It's a lot about finding people who are like-minded, who have shared experiences, or who want to have shared experiences in some way. So with the garden, it's about this idea that we're building this community for the curious, and there are all these people out there who love to learn, but maybe their friends don't really have the same passion for learning that they have. They read books and they're always saying, oh, you should read this book, and everyone's like, oh, that sounds boring, I'm not sure that's for me. And finding other people who have that like geekiness, that nerdiness, that like love of learning about facts, who want to watch documentaries on TV and listen to podcasts or whatever these things are. Finding that your kind of tribe is a big part, I think, of why people join a community. And then why you stay, I think, is where the value comes in. What do I gain from it, and how do I contribute to it? How can I support other people in the community so I feel valuable as well?
Gosh, you were speaking to me when you were saying all that about learning. I mean, I keep buying books and listening to podcasts and TED Talk, and I'm so frustrated. I'm never going to be able to learn everything there is to learn. It's just too much good stuff. So the idea that somebody will create all that, so you just know what to be learning, what's trendy, what should I be keeping up to breast with, just sounds really amazing. Because you can't read all the papers. It's just so much information coming at you now. But it just sounds like you have my tribe right there. And finally, last thing, what book would you recommend?
Oh, I read so much. I primarily read nonfiction though. So I'm afraid I don't really have that many fiction recommendations, and I could send you a list as long as my arm, because I'm always reading. But to your point, one of the challenges with reading is a book takes a week to read, and sometimes you want it sort of more direct insight, and that's what we're trying to do with the garden. So we bring the academics out of the institutions in order to do that. I'm going to give 2 recommendations. I've actually brought the books with me. So if you want, a book that I think is really helpful for life and business is a book called Connect by Carol Robbins and David Bradford. These were actually my professors at university, and they do a class called Interpersonal Dynamics, which is all about how do you create better relationships with people through how you relate to them, how you give feedback, how do you receive feedback, how do you not make assumptions, how do you lead with empathy and compassion. It's a great book, and they are some of the most amazing professors that I've worked with. So Connect is a good book because it will help you not just in business but in all of your relationships.
Fabulous.
The second book is more of a joy book. So this is by one of my favorite fellows at the Garden called James Fox. He's an art historian at Cambridge University, and it's called The World According to Colour. And it's a cultural history through different colours. So, why is the world's favorite colour blue? What is that? Why do we think that white means kind of pure? Why in certain countries is red the favorite color? Why do these things happen? And it's brilliantly written, and it's one of those kind of joyful books that I think you'll come away being like, oh wow, that's really fascinating.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much, Sophie. It's been an absolute joy and a pleasure talking to you. I feel like we have so much in common as well. And I'm sure that so many people listening to this podcast or watching the video later on YouTube will just be inspired by your authenticity and just your joy. It's such a joy to talk to you. So refreshing. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you all for staying and watching this interview to the end. If you loved it, please give us a review, because otherwise I don't know if what I'm doing is right. If you want more people like Sophie, please put it in the comments so we know you want more Sophies to join us on our interviews. And if you're not a part of our community, it is forwardladies.com. Go and check it out. We have a 14-day free trial. And one last plug from me is that I launched a book, Unstoppable Women, on International Women's Day. It's women just like Sophie. I love to share stories because I think stories really change lives. They make you feel that things that were otherwise impossible are possible for you, just by finding someone whose story you can really connect with. And so if you love Sophie's story and you want to know more women like Sophie, please do check it out. It's available on Amazon as well. So thank you so much, Sophie. We should connect after this.
Thank you for having me. It's been wonderful. It's been fun to answer all your questions and share some stories.
Yes, fabulous. Bye.
Bye.